Sounds pretty nice, huh? Well, one of the things that makes this chord progression sound the way it does is the minor ninth chord. And let's play one right now. So on the piano with your left hand, what I want you to do is play the notes C, E flat, G, B flat, and then with your right hand, you're going to hit D. Hit them all at once. Ooh, sounds pretty smooth. Now, this chord alone is really great for playing beautiful arpeggio patterns up and down on the piano. Smooth! Welcome to the classroom, piano students on the web. In this lesson, I'm going to be showing you some cool sounding jazz chords, just like we showed you in the beginning, and then I'm going to build on that, and I'm going to show you how to put in some jazzy spice into your favorite pieces. I want to take a minute to talk about the theory of this minor ninth chord so that you can be more versatile with it and play it anywhere on the piano. So here I have the chord written out just like we talked about, playing the bottom four notes with your left hand and then this top note with your right hand. The first component I want to talk about with this chord is the bottom three notes, which is our triad. And a triad is just a three-note chord, and in this case, we have a minor triad. The four triads you should be aware of as a beginner are major, which sounds happy, minor, which sounds sad, diminished, which sounds uneasy, and augmented, which sounds mysterious and uneasy. But let's talk about major first. If you want to play a major chord built on any note, you play the bottom note, and the next note up is 4 half steps away, or semitones as some people like to call it. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the next one between this one and this one is only 3. So the formula is 4 and then 3. And a minor chord sounds sad with its formula being 3 half steps in 4. So it's the opposite of a major, which was 4 and 3. This one's 3 and 4. Diminished is 3 and 3 half steps. And an augmented chord is 4 and 4. So that was our triad right there. But the note I really want to talk about next is this one right here. And this one is called the 7th. Now you may be saying, Tim, where do you get all these numbers for? 5th, 7th, 9, flat 7. What's the deal? The numbers all come from the distance between the root, which happens to be the bottom note, and the next note up. So a third would be there, a fifth would be there, a 7th would be there, and a 9th would be here. So this is where we got the 4 notes of our chord. They wasn't exactly what I played, but in terms of the intervals, 3, 5, 7, and 9, they're all there. And that's where we get those numbers from. So here's our 9th. It's 9 notes up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 from the bottom note. But right now, I want to talk about this note right here with the arrow, the 7th. So if I were to play C, E, G, B, that is what we call a major 7th. A major 7th is always only a half step away from what we call the tonic, or an octave above the root note. So C, and then an octave above is C, and therefore our major 7th must be right there. Now that's not what we have though. We have what's called a minor 7th, which is where we flat the 7th to a B flat, which is a whole step away from C. You got to be careful in certain parts of the piano. Say we had a G chord, right? And say, this was a C7 chord, right? Just evenly spacing it out on C. But if you do that on G, it's not the same chord. And if you look, we have a major chord on the bottom, that's fine. But our 7th, even though it's a white key like before, it's actually a whole step away from the G, and a major 7th would actually be right there. One common thing is they'll often call minor 7th flat 7th. Next, I want to talk a little bit about the 9th. Obviously, it's 9 notes up from the root. And you can have regular 9, and we'll talk about in a little bit about things like flat 9. Ooh, sounds beautiful, doesn't it? And sharp 9. We're going to dive deep into 9th chords here towards the end, as well as some other actually very interesting chords. But first, I want to talk about 7th chords some more, because there's a lot of different types that you should be aware of, and these chords are fun jazz chords to play all on their own. One quick thing I want to mention is these 7th chords, 9ths, and so forth. These are all called extended chords, by the way, because you're extending beyond the triad. So the first type of seventh chord I want to talk about is the one we actually played a minute ago, C, E, G, and B. You have a major triad on the bottom and a major seventh on top. If you have that, it's called a major seventh. And it's a little confusing, but it's written in two ways, either C major 7 with an MAJ there, or C triangle 7. That automatically means major 7th. Now what if I have a triad on the bottom, but we have a flat 7th, or a minor 7th, rather. That's a very bluesy type of chord, and we call that a dominant 7th chord. However, in your music, you're almost never going to see it written dominant 7th. In fact, never. You're just going to see it written as C7. Now question, we talked about major 7th, dominant 7th, or just C7, or whatever this would be G7, so it's whatever the base of the chord is plus 7. But anyway, we talked about major 7, regular 7, and then what if we put a minor triad on the bottom? Kind of like we had for the minor 9th, right? But if we don't have the 9th, we call that a minor 7th chord. And it's just written as C min 7. So if we have a minor 7th, and say we lower what's called the 5th, which is that G there, to a G flat, we now have C half diminished 7th. I know it's a little bit strange, but if you look at the bottom, we actually have a diminished chord, which I told you about in the beginning. Remember, it's 3 half steps and 3 half steps between that one and then that one. So a diminished chord, and then you have a minor 7th up top, half diminished. It looks like this on the sheet music. So the circle itself means diminished, and if it's half diminished, it'll have a slash through it. And might as well write diminished here, C diminished 7th, because that's what we're going to talk about next. This is called C fully diminished 7th. So you have a diminished triad on the bottom, and then you have what's called a diminished 7th. So here's major 7th, flat 7th, or minor 7th, and then diminished 7th, fully diminished. Now, if you want to find a fully diminished chord based on any note without having to go through all the different iterations first, you hit a note, you go up 3 half steps, 1, 2, 3, 3 more, and 3 more. So it's 3, 3, and 3. And like I mentioned before, these 7th chords alone are really fun to play around with. Okay, I said there was going to be more about the 9th chords, and I'm not kidding. And it actually brings me to a perfect opportunity to explain to you something very important in music that perhaps I've never explained on the channel before. Quick, play minor 9ths. Do it now. There we go. C minor 9. Might as well pick that one. Now remember, I said there was 9, flat 9, and sharp 9 if you sharp it or flat it. Now, let's talk about flat 9 first. And I mentioned, man, this chord doesn't sound very good, but there still is a place for it in the music. This is a perfect opportunity to explain the difference between consonants and dissonance. Consonants sounds very pleasing to the ear and doesn't really clash, so it's pleasing, and I would say that it sounds stable. Dissonance is the opposite. It sounds very unsettling and is unstable. If you had a piece that was all dissonance, it would probably sound something like this. Music to my ears, right? I had a problem with it. First of all, not only did it clash a lot, it didn't really sound like it was going anywhere. So dissonance, this is very important. Remember, if you remember one thing out of the whole lesson, it's this. Dissonance likes to be surrounded by consonants. And what this creates, as you'll see in a second, but let me show you. So here I'm going to play the little improv I played in the beginning, and I'm going to insert a G flat 9 chord in there. As you can see, it sounds just as bad as the D minor flat 9, or the D flat 9, I should say. And I'm going to add that in between 2 consonant chords. We're going to do D9 as our first one. And then we're going to fit in our flat 9 and then we're going to what's called resolving it. Now, let me play the whole thing for you. Sounded really cool, huh? At least I thought it did. Hopefully you did too. See, by putting that consonant in the middle, we had consonants in the beginning, which sounded pleasing, right? And then we had our dissonance. Now, by itself, sounds absolutely terrible, but we resolved it into another consonant chord. So if you're going to pick a dissonant chord, make sure it's surrounded by consonant chords. You're going to find this common throughout all of your music because music likes to build tension and release it, and one of the ways it does it is with this consonance and dissonance. Remember it, you're going to see it again. There's a lot more, but first I want to introduce a new section which is called non-piano related things that help you learn piano. And today's non-piano related thing that helps you learn piano is drinking water. Yes, I'm serious. Drinking enough water will help your body and your brain work to its fullest. And I actually have a story, so it's really exciting. During the summer, I'd wake up in the morning. You know how in summer it's really, really hot and you sweat a lot. I wake up in the morning, I'd have my usual cup of coffee, like one glass of water or so. I would eat, and I'd be like, man, it would get to be like 1 or 2, and I'd be like, man, I need another cup of coffee. And something strange was happening. I was drinking the cup of coffee, and I was getting more tired. And I was like, man, what is going on? And then, of course, I looked to the internet, of course, and one of the things that was suggested is that I'm possibly dehydrated, and instead of drinking another cup of coffee, I should actually drink a big glass of water. And sure enough, by drinking more water, I actually had a lot more energy. And I think the problem the whole time was I was actually dehydrated. So please drink your water. Don't rely on coffee too much, you know, just a little bit goes a long way, I find. And there you go. If you remember in the very beginning, I said that I was going to teach you how to play that thing I played, and I'm going to come through and teach you how to play it right now. Now, we've been playing a lot of minor ninth chords and just those chords, but when I played was a bunch of chords, as you can see with my left hand, and that's called a chord progression, which is a repeated pattern of chords throughout a sheet of music, a piece of music. Now, this is how it works. So say we're in the key of C. We have 7 individual notes in the key of C. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, which being number 7. And each of those notes, you can build a chord on it to create 7 individual chords. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. One of the most common chord progressions in all music is what's called a 1-4-5 progression. I'll actually play this with my left hand. So here's 1, build on C, and then 4, that's the 4th note of the C scale, so that's our 4th chord. 5 chord, back to a 1 chord. But that's not what I played in the beginning. I actually used what's called a jazz progression, which is a 2. So you're starting on 2, a minor chord. You're going to 5. And then 1. And then see if you could play those as 7th chords. To add in a little more spice.
Spicy meatball!
So in the intro, I played a 2 chord with a 7th added on it. And then with my right hand, I was really just noodling around different notes of the D minor chord. And I put in some flavor notes as well. And this is an easy way to do it. So one of the notes of the chord is an A, right? So you have A down here, A up here. And say I want to hit this A with my right hand. But I'm going to slip and hit the wrong note first. And that's a great way in adding in some flavor notes. So there's our first chord. And then I moved to what's called a G dominant 7th chord, which was our 5 chord. So we played 2, now we're playing 5. But I didn't play it in that order. I played it like this, and instead of playing the root G on the bottom, I just moved my fingers in like this. It's the same notes as the G dominant 7th chord, it's just in what we call a different inversion. Starting on a different note of the chord. So that was our second chord. And remember, I hit that flat 9 with it. And then lastly, we're moving back to a 1 chord, which is just C again. So again, it's D minor, and then G, and I added in a flat 9, and then I just bring it down, and we're hitting a C chord. So 2, 5, 1. So just try that with your left hand for a few minutes if you're getting confused. And then what I want you to do is you don't have to play the exact same thing I did with the right hand, but I just want you to play around on the different notes of the chord and see if you can come up with something cool. And the improvs that you're going to come up with at first might not sound as complicated with mine, and that's totally fine. You want to start simple and work your way up from there. With improv, it's practice, practice, practice. When I first started improving, it was really foreign to me. And then after practicing it for a few weeks, I just love it, and it just makes all sorts of sense. So I would actually start with that minor 9th chord we played in the beginning, just playing some arpeggios on that, and then adding in the entire progression after that. There is more. All right, I still have to show you how to make your pieces more jazzy because I promised you that. But before that, I have a thought-provoking question. Is jazz piano something you're interested in? Please let me know in the comments. I actually can make a few more jazz lessons, or quite a few more, and I would like to know if the interest is there. Okay, so I found Jingle Bells, which is a pretty standard song that a lot of us know, and this is a really good opportunity to add in some jazzy spice into this tune. So instead of playing the left hand, we're going to be playing the chords that are written above. So above that first note D, we have a G written. So that's the chord that we're going to be playing in our left hand, and then see how at the end of this first line here it moves to a C. So you're playing the chords that are written above, and then we're going to build on that. Okay, so the first thing, instead of just playing a regular G chord, we're going to actually add sevenths into all these chords. So here we go. This is what it's going to sound like. And I'm adding what we call a little comping. So instead of just playing the chord and holding it as a whole note, I'm just doing a little rhythm to it just to add a little bit more spice. So that's one way to make your pieces sound more jazzy, is to just make all the chords dominant 7th chords. They got to be dominant 7th for it to work. One other thing I want to mention is if you have a chord like right here in the beginning, and then there's nothing written for a while until the next chord, it's automatically assumed that those empty spaces are the chord before it. So these are all G's, and then C, and then even this next one down here is also still C until the chord changes. So you're aware of that. Now, say you've practiced this whole thing in dominant 7th chords. I want to show you how to add in some super secret special chords so that you can make it sound even better. So do you remember that 2, 5, 1 progression I've been talking about this whole time? Well, we're going to add that in, and I'm going to show you how to do it. So we're going to take our G, and we're actually going to move it to this last measure here. And then we're going to add in some chords in the measures before. And we're actually going to use that 2, 5, 1 progression to do it. Just keep in mind now that we're in the key of G, not the key of C. So this is our 1 chord. This is our 2 chord. That's an A minor. And if you could add a 7th on it, A minor 7th. So that's 2. 5 would be D dominant 7th, D, F sharp, A, C. And then 1 is G, B, D, F, which is our G 7th chord. So in this first measure, we're going to play an A minor 7th chord and then move to a D 7 chord and then to a G 7 chord and then to a C 7 chord there. So we have changed it and made it a lot more interesting. Now you may start this first measure and be like, ooh, that sounds kind of clashy, right? But when you move to that D7, it kind of resolves and sounds a bit better. So by moving some of the chords over and adding the 2-5-1 progression, that standard jazz progression, you can make some of your pieces sound a bit more jazzy. And then if you don't want to mess with all that theory stuff, just add 7th chords to everything, dominant 7th chords to everything, and it will make it sound more jazzy. Okay, we got one more final important section, which is teaching you some other awesome chords to play around with. And then I have a final tip at the end. Okay, we're going to play some interesting chords here. Let's play a C minor 9th chord first, because that's kind of like what we started the whole lesson with. C, E flat, G, B, and then D. Then remember that there's flat 9 as well. You want to use that only in certain circumstances. When should you use the flat 9 chord? In between consonances. Remember that. Now you're saying, Tim, there's a 9th chord. Is there such thing as an 11th chord? Yup. And it definitely has its own type of sound and flavor to it. And this one, again, I would say is more of a dissonant chord, so you're probably going to be using it in between 2 consonances. So just be aware that there is 11, and there's actually sharp 11 as well. So you may be saying, Tim, there's 9th, 11. Is there 13th? Yup. There are 13th chords. Sometimes you can omit the 9th and 11th if it says that you can. And this is another chord. It has some dissonance to it, but it almost has a sound of like wonder to it. So as you can see that these chords have kind of a different flavor between each one. I would say this one's the most tense, but it also feels like it really wants to go somewhere. Okay, just for fun, I'm going to see if I can add in an 11th chord into the little improv that I did, and I'm going to add it. Where should you think I should add it? I'm going to add it to that middle chord, that G7 chord. And that would be, see, when I play it all by itself, it sounds terrible, right? But let's see if we can add it in and get it to sound good. Yeah, I really like that. Or you could do... Oh, that sounds very nice. And if you ever want to resolve a chord, see how that clashes? And the next chord, you know, is going to be made up of the notes C, E, G, B. And to resolve it, all you do is move to a chord note. Now we play the whole thing. Sometimes I like to add in some extra notes in between. If you watch this video, chances are you're interested in learning piano or another instrument, and it's really important that you avoid certain common mistakes that are going to slow you down big time. Well, luckily for you, I have a lesson right here on the common mistakes you should avoid as a beginner, and if you avoid them, you're going to make a lot more progress, not only at piano or any instrument that you want to play. Your piano teacher, Tim here. Thank you so much for coming, and I'll see you, yes, you, in the next lesson.